You're listening to The Paul Higgins Show, where ambitious tech consultants come to unlock their potential. After 18 years as a global leader, I launched several businesses, culminating in a successful exit. I'm sharing what I learned, plus what's working now from mentoring tech consultants. You will hear leaders within our industry to help you build a business you love that allows you to do what you want. If you are looking for immediate cash flow wins to fuel your growth, go to our free ebook at paulhigginsmentoring.com/roadmap. Slack is only a messaging platform. Hello, this is Paul, and welcome to the Paul Higgins Show, episode 556. And in this podcast, we got Laurence Fitch from Brid.io to tell you that no, Slack is a lot more than a messaging platform, how it can help you, but more importantly, how it can help your clients. With over 10 years of experience in sales and consulting, Laurence is dedicated to helping organizations harness the power of Slack, and he co-founded Brid, a Slack consultancy focused on optimizing workforce experiences. He's leveraging his background as a former employee of both Slack and Salesforce, which he talks about, and he possesses a deep understanding of how to effectively utilize Slack within an organization to create a connected collaboration hub that centralizes notifications and streamlining processes. His mission is to empower employees and customers to be proactive and satisfied regardless of their location. He talks a lot about his team, how they are located around the world. Like to see Laurence on video, go to Paul Higgins Mentoring YouTube channel. And now I'll hand you over to Laurence Fitch from Brid.io. So great to have you here, Laurence.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Great to be here.
Yeah, well, we've done the introduction, and there's a lot of exciting news that's happening in your space. We're going to really have to fight to get it in 20 minutes because you've done some amazing things, including helping us set up our Slack community. But why don't we start with who your ideal client is and what problems you love to solve for them?
Yeah, great. Our ideal client is honestly anyone that's been using Slack or looking to either move on to Slack. I think there's a big misconception within the industry and in general that Slack's just a messaging tool. And obviously coming from Slack myself, I've seen pretty much the best version of Slack you could probably ever see implemented and used. Our ideal customer is someone that's looking to change the way that they work within their business using Slack by going, that one step forward from just the messaging tool as they might perceive it.
Yeah, and what are some of the gaps that they see? Obviously, you're introducing Slack to them, or maybe introducing new features to Slack. But if they're not on Slack at the moment, what are some of the problems that Slack helps solve?
Yeah, so we see 2 or 3 main types of customers who aren't using Slack today that are looking to move on to it. A lot of companies, are using out of the box free tools such as Telegram or WhatsApp, or they're using Microsoft Teams. But I would say using is light word for probably how they're using Teams. And of course, particularly if they're using something that's like not really sanctioned, like WhatsApp, they want to bring their communications into a more professional business setting. Then when we talk to customers who are using Teams, often the business probably has rolled out Teams. However, it's being used for general messaging. And in general, what we do see is that Teams is not a loved product by users as much as Slack. So people want to see that functionality of Slack within their business. And actually, there's a great coexist model. Many of Slack's biggest customers are also Microsoft shops as well.
Yeah, and from your experience, does it normally come from top down or bottom up, the transition or the addition of Slack into a company?
Yeah, it comes from both ways. To be honest, you need both users to be on board. And often it starts very organically, mostly within tech and dev, which is kind of Slack's old home ground before it got acquired by Salesforce. Again, that's another misnomer of Slack is that many companies see it as a developer tool. So often times you'll actually have Slack within the organization, the tech team are using it, the IT team are using it, but the rest of the team are either using something like WhatsApp or Microsoft Teams. A lot of the time it's our job to go in and say, well, look, if these guys or girls are using it, there must be a reason, and why not roll that out across the rest of your business? So that's what we often see.
Right. So yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't thought of it going that way. I thought it would be more from non-IT based, but as you said, it's from IT. And you had a fantastic career in Salesforce. You also spent some time in Slack. Why firstly did you decide to step out with Jacob and start your own business?
Yeah, so I mean, it goes back to probably the first ever time I logged into Slack, which falls outside somewhat my Salesforce career. I've worked in actually media and advertising technology sales for, the first 6 or 7 years of my career. I then joined an Israeli tech startup called Datarama. For anyone that's in the Salesforce ecosystem, you'll know that that was acquired into Salesforce, into the marketing cloud side of the business. So I was there for 6 or 7 months before it got acquired, and they were big Slack users. And I had never used this tool before. I think I was using, Skype for Business or a mixture of, WhatsApp or email, other tools. And Israeli companies are, very good at getting the most out of their software. And I saw how in depth they had used Slack. They had built actually a Slack application to help customers understand their media and advertising spend. So if you had Slack, they had built a Datarama bot so that every day, instead of you having to even go into Datarama, it would send you a message saying, oh, you've spent too much money on Google or Facebook, and here's how you should, rationalize your advertising spends. So that really blew my mind from day one,
Yeah.
seeing what it could do. And yeah, since then, obviously I had 3 or 4 roles within Salesforce, the final one being the Slack account executive, launching Slack across many countries in this region. And I just jumped at the opportunity to be part of the founding sales team here in Asia, in Singapore, where there was no Slack presence. Everything was being done via the Australian entity. And yeah, knowing what I knew from the transformative capabilities from Datarama, I knew that, bringing these two things together, Slack plus Salesforce, was going to be a winning combination.
Brilliant. So that's the product side, and you've completely sold me on the product, and we'll go into more detail in a moment. But what about your own business side? You're in Singapore, you're with one of the best companies in the world. Why take the chance and jump out on your own?
Yeah, wasn't an easy decision, particularly at the time. My wife was about 9 months pregnant with our second child. Not something that I took lightly, but I saw this repeatable kind of playbook, I guess I would say, while I was at Datarama. Then I worked at Interaction Studio within Salesforce, where obviously when they acquire a new company, there's a real gap between that company having, distribution model of a couple of hundred or a couple of thousand salespeople to, 80,000 employees in Salesforce. Partners is the way that it starts to scale. And after being in the Slack team for around a year or so, I was just quite, I guess, shocked in many ways that many of the big partners like Accenture, Deloitte, but also the Salesforce partners just weren't really taking up the opportunity that I could see. And, then I was working closer and closer with my business partner, Jacob, who was one of the first customer success managers. And he had a background at Deloitte in consulting as well. And we could just see that the massive opportunity that was on the tables. When it was an idea floating around my head, maybe I thought, am I crazy? But then when I got together with Jacob, both of us said, look, well, either we're both crazy or we both are really onto something here.
Yeah, fantastic. And it's good to see, English and Australians collaborating and cooperating well. And I'm assuming in the terms of the contract, you weren't allowed to talk about cricket, but we won't go there at the moment. But that's fantastic. So you could see what others couldn't from your experience in Israel and other companies. And at that stage, I'm assuming there wasn't many partners within the Slack ecosystem. It was, basically untouched is what I'm seeing.
Yes, somewhat. I mean, Slack as a product, like we said, going back to the original points I was making, is viewed as a messaging tool and is
Yes.
has somewhat has been rolled out organically across organizations. And there's been, of course, like I would say, a 5% of companies that have stumbled across its real capabilities. Customers like Grab, I would say, which are like the Uber of Asia,
Yes.
and one of the marquee customers for Slack in this region, and other customers like Cebu Pacific Airlines, who have built a flight operations center based on Slack. So when their planes take off, a Slack channel gets launched, and when their planes land, it gets archived, and everything in between, up into including, someone being sick on a seat, or, a bird strike hitting the engine, it all gets within Slack. So we really saw those opportunities for companies to do something more. But I guess a lot of these other businesses as well, they don't use Slack themselves, right? Slack as a tool, if you use it, that users, even if they're just using it for messaging, are very passionate about. So unless you really live and breathe Slack, I always make the joke that you could never turn up to a customer meeting as a partner who's going to implement Slack for them and send them a Microsoft Teams link. They'll probably not accept your next call.
Yeah. Completely get it. And you talk about, the unseen, like what a lot of end clients are missing in Slack. So we've talked about messaging, but what are some of the things that the capability of that us here listening to Laurence wouldn't?
Yeah, so I think go back to that first, month or 2 months that I had when I joined the Slack team when I was working at Salesforce. I honestly haven't had an experience like it in my career. I think I got a peek in the window when I was at Datarama, and then it was like a full-on complete 360-degree change in the way that I worked when I joined Slack. To have an onboarding experience that was fully in Slack, that was automated, that basically required me, I would say in the first month or 2 months that I worked at Slack, I probably had 10 emails maximum.
Yeah.
So, and that was across everything. Almost the only emails that you would have in Slack is that first email to connect with a customer, to get them into your Slack. Every single thing that I did was contained within the platform. Those things included Salesforce, for example. Even when I worked at Salesforce, it wasn't the most smooth experience in the world getting like a quote approved internally. Often I would have to jump on calls with people, etc. And then I saw this process that was being done in Slack where DSR requests, deal rooms would be spun up automatically based on, different levels of approvals. Legal person would be looped into a channel, and I could do everything up into including the DocuSign by, a custom or native integration within Slack to send a contract to a customer. So yeah, really mind blown by what could be done in that first initial couple of months working at Slack.
Yeah, great. And I know that, you built our community, the Tech Collective, which, is, I was blown away by, I sort of thought it was just a messaging app. And to be honest, I've used a lot of other tools in the past to run communities. And one of the things everyone complained about is that, I've got to go into something else, right? And you still get that with Slack, but more people are on Slack, particularly in our ecosystem, like you said, the tech ecosystem, that it was, not a completely different tool for them. But, the things that I learned was around, like you said, the onboarding and the automation of the onboarding process, Canvas, which we hadn't really done a Canvas. Then there was linked to other databases, like we've got a database in Airtable that was linked beautifully to that. But, that's just scratching the surface of what's to come. So why don't you tell us a little bit about some of those things that I've mentioned from your perspective, and then we'll talk about, what's to come.
Yeah, to be honest, it's that question of automation is the biggest part about what Slack brings to the table. And it's the ability for, I would say, non IT users, although if you are a coder or developer, you can obviously do these things in a much more thoughtful and built out way. But it's the ability for me. So obviously I run a sales team across the whole world, covering different regions. We've got someone based in New York, we've got someone based in London. So it's this whole concept of working, I think, asynchronously, which we know is the world we live in today. I know there's the big debate about, I would say forcing or tempting people back into work, maybe 5 days a week, but I just don't think that's ever going to happen. think that a fully remote environment where you never see your employees or your team in person is also a good thing. But I think there's somewhere in the middle where that works. And I think Slack is the perfect tool to be able to do that. For example, it's very easy for me. I don't know how to write any code to set up a workflow so that each week there's a message that's posted into a channel where all of my team fill out what they've done for this week. They record a little clip, and they share their pipeline, share their forecast with me in that channel, and I can go and review it before I have the team call with them,
Yes.
rather than the old school way of doing things, which is to set up a 1 hour call where I would have everyone talk about their pipeline and what they're going to bring into the business, which, to be honest, the girl that sits in New York, does she need to hear about all the deals that the guy has in EMEA? Maybe, maybe not. So we can have much more of a productive conversation and get into the interesting parts of how we can help each other, rather than, sitting around and doing a round table and everyone hearing everyone else's information that may or may not be suitable or relevant to them. But at the same time, all of that is contained within channel. If Sarah does want to go and have a look at Jack's pipeline or his video recording, she can go and do that as well.
Yeah, great. And canvases? What's a canvas for those that aren't familiar with it?
Yeah, so Slack Canvas is, as it kind of suggests by the name, is a place where you can house documents, you can add context to things like channels. It's essentially a place where you can take notes. And the great thing about a canvas is it's not there in many ways to replace potentially tools that you've got. It's a
Yes.
place to bring them together. At the same time that I think biggest challenges or opportunities that customers and partners or anyone has at the moment, which is remote working, hiring people wherever we are in the world, working in this asynchronous fashion. One of the other big challenges that creates is, where do I find documents? Where do I find software? Where do I find the information? And what we learned very early on when we were working at Slack is this difference between pulling information and pushing it. When you've set Slack up correctly, it should be very easy for you to pull the information rather than constantly having to tap someone on the shoulder, whether that's physically or digitally. So Canvas is a great way where you can put, a Google document, you can upload a Excel spreadsheet, you can upload a lot of context around what this channel is for, or an account plan, for example, with a customer, so that anyone in the business, whether they are up to speed or not, or they've been away for a week, can just go into that canvas and quickly understand what's going on and not search for the links in 20 different places, which might be buried in someone's personal computer or their bookmark page.
And just a reminder with Laurence Finch from Bryd.io, it's BRYD.io, and there's some examples of that on their website, etc. I know this is a video, as in you can see Laurence on our YouTube channel, and it's audio if you're listening on most of your key podcasts. But to go and see some of those examples, I think it's great to go and dig in further, and we'll have the links to those. And I think well, it's probably not new to you, but new to a lot of us listening, is lists. Sort of it seems like it's the next frontier for Slack. Tell us a little bit about lists and how end clients are using them.
Yeah, so Slack List was released fairly recently in the last couple of months. We were actually on the pilot beta for it for around 3 months before it was launched, which was great. So we got to offer some feedback and to the product management team. Yeah, Slack Lists is essentially a lightweight project management tool natively embedded within Slack. Great part about lists is that it's an easy way for you to track, the status of projects, whether that be a marketing campaign that you're running or an in-person event. And it's, again, one of the key benefits of it is that it's just right there in Slack. Some people are looking to see, look, is this the same as Monday.com or Jira? And I think it's very much a lightweight version of it. And I think what people enjoy about lists is that just like we mentioned earlier, you don't have to leave Slack to use it. That's, I think, what Slack is focusing on a lot at the moment, is bringing as much productivity and functionality. And then you can see that a lot with Salesforce as well. They also have a tool called Sales Elevate, which obviously we use extensively. So my team, for example, don't need to ever even leave Slack to update their pipeline. They can update opportunity statuses, etc. whether you're using the native features in Slack or whether you've got a tool like Jira, which is already super built out, I think the value that we bring to is to help them determine what's the best way of using that tool, either natively within Slack and getting the most out of their Slack subscription or license, or how do they connect their other tools and make sure that they're not what we call context switching,
Yes.
which is a big thing, which I think got all these tools now, which is great. But the difficulty is that, we're getting to the end of the day and we're all pretty knackered, working all hours and jumping across all these different UIs. And Slack obviously really helps solve that issue by having a single pane of glass where you've got almost a digital HQ for all of your, both people and personal communications, but also the communications coming from your tools and software as well.
Yeah, and I think there's two things. One is definitely that I did a lot of neuroscience when I worked for Franklin Covey, and that context switching, about 15 minutes to get back into the true context. So I
Hmm.
think that's huge. But also the tech bloat. We've all had post-COVID, a lot of applications, and all the companies now are looking at, well, what do I really need? I think it's a good opportunity to reduce the amount of products as well. But as Lauren said, I think lists is if you're a light user of project management software, I think it's a great option. But I think still, if you're more a heavy user, whether it's be Monday, Asana, ClickUp, whatever it is, I think it'll take time. Who knows if Slack will get there? But I think it's definitely for light users. I think it's perfect. And where just whilst we're on product before we move to partners, AI, listen to a podcast, can't listen to the news, can't do anything at the moment without AI. What's down the immediate track for Slack and AI?
Yeah, well, I think going back to that original point around whether you have Slack or not, what companies want is for their individuals to be able to pull and find their information as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
So I think particularly for customers that have been on Slack for a long time, if you've been on Slack for 5 years, you've literally hundreds of thousands or even millions of messages. Then Slack AI, which was released recently, is a great way of summarizing threads. Let's say, for example, you go on PTO for a week and you come back and it's the same old, story where, you're going to have hundreds of notifications within messages. So Slack AI is a great way of summarizing that information really quickly. Giving people time back in their days. And again, it's all natively embedded within Slack, which people really love. At the moment, it's mostly contained within the Slack ecosystem. So the more you use Slack, the more beneficial it is. So, it can summarize canvases and summarize lists, etc. But, I'm looking forward to the kind of version 2 or 3 of it, where I believe it's going to be much more of a, almost an enterprise-wide AI search tool, which can actually look into your Google Docs and start leveraging insights from that as well. Yeah, looking forward to that also coming along.
Yeah, definitely. And if you're a Tech Collective member, I'm sure you're looking forward to that as well, rather than diving, into Airtable all the time. But I think I know you once said to me, which really struck me, which was, Salesforce potentially look at Slack as being the window to the rest of their world. And I think if you look from that perspective, like at the moment, you look at how many communication you've got. WhatsApp, like personally, WhatsApp, SMS, phone calls, like being overseas, it was just, on holidays, you got all these different ways of communicating. And often I'd hear and I'd love, could I just have one that sits over the top that helps
Yeah.
make it easier? And I think that's what, if I understand it right, that's Slack's vision, or Salesforce vision for Slack. They bought it for what, 277 billion or
Yeah.
something like that. And I'm sure you don't spend that amount of money without a long-term plan for where the product sits. And I think
Yeah.
that'll be exciting. Due to time, what I'll do is ask you a question, which is for all of our Salesforce partners listening. So hello to you. Why would they bring an agency in like Grid to help with Slack rather than just doing it themselves?
Yeah, well, I think it goes back to the original starting of the business where before doing it myself, I did talk to some other partners that I knew while I was at Salesforce and Slack. The honest truth is that it's a very different skill set
Yeah.
to setting up a CRM. I like to almost use the words, Slack is a touchy-feely product, touches all parts of the business, and there's a lot of feelings that are associated with it. And without throwing Salesforce under the bus, I would say that CRM is not necessarily so much of an emotive product, right? Quite functional. It's about, setting things up, closing deals, etc. And there's no better CRM in the world that does that. Whereas with Slack, a lot of the skill sets that come around the implementations and projects that we do is around change management, which I think heavily goes back to obviously Jacob's Slack career, but also the time he spent at Deloitte. So when Jacob worked at Deloitte, he was involved in, HR transformation type projects. And essentially, the stakeholders that we deal with are often very different to the stakeholders. It's not the CROs, it's usually COOs, it's usually CHROs. And yeah, when things change within Slack, often the whole business very quickly sees those changes. So you have to be very thoughtful around any changes that you make, because as I say, Slack is a very emotive product, and people will give feedback to the senior management, the leadership team within seconds if they see something that they do or do not like. When you touch Slack, you have to make sure that you do it in a very thoughtful way. And it's just a slightly different skill set, the kind of like Service Cloud or Sales Cloud implementations that you would
Yeah,
make.
and I think if you fast forward that Slack's the window to the rest of Salesforce, I think it adds value to your clients to make it easier to work, and therefore they're using the things that you are implementing better. So I do think it's from a Salesforce partner, I'm sitting there thinking, I'm not going to make a lot of revenue because the license fees of Slack are quite small.
Yeah.
But what I am going to do is make it easier for my companies and my users to use the products that I've got in there. And, Salesforce, I agree with you that it's a great sales CRM, but it's always not the most intuitive sales
Yes.
CRM to use. And I think, if you look longer term, I think Slack helps to be that window to make it more intuitive. And rather than, the cost and investment to change Salesforce interface and the user experience is so huge that I think
Yeah.
this can certainly help. So I'll put the links to Laurence, so that if you are a Salesforce partner, you can reach out to him. We'll have also Laurence into a expert session just for our TC members,
Yeah.
where they can ask more questions. But just quickly, I know that you recently got a successful funding round, which was fantastic. I know it's public. It was 300,000. Was that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yep.
300,000 US
Yeah,
dollars. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, quick question is, why take funding versus not? It's it's like black and white. Some people think that you should do it through
Mm.
working capital and cash flow. Other people think you should take investment. Just for you, what was the reason for you and Jacob to take the investment?
Yeah, I think the decision was not one that we took lightly. It's not not an easy environment right now to raise money, particularly no matter what you're doing. Even if maybe have AI plastered all over your logo or website, people aren't just throwing money around anywhere. I think it goes back to my experience working at Salesforce, in that seeing these businesses scale. As I say, we founded and launched a business in Singapore, mainly because that's where myself and Jacob met. Our first customer came from the US. And since then, we've done a fair bit of business here in Asia Pacific. But I would say that the maturity levels are probably higher for services and applications and tools that we're building across, Europe and America. It was predominantly to fund that expansion and to get boots on the ground in both the UK and in America and New York, which we've done now. And yeah, we are also building, much like a Salesforce SI would build App Exchange
Yes.
tools. We've got our first Slack app, which we've just built as well. So it's to fund the product development side of the business as well. Just released what we call a broadcast bot, which is something that's going to be in Tech Collective soon, I think. Paul, you'll be able to try it out. So it's the ability to send multiple messages into different Slack channels all at one time, which
Yeah.
saves you doing cut and paste, cut and paste. And it's a great tool for comms and HR teams as well, which we see as, some of the gaps. Slack is an amazing tool, but can't do everything. So yeah, we've got about a 5 or 6 other apps that we've lined up that we want to build. So it's to fund the kind of SaaS subscription side of the business, as well as to scale the business quickly with, some very strategic hires, both of which used to work at Slack as well. So you can see there's a theme there.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, look, I could ask you a lot more questions, but to you listening, we'll keep it short as we always do. And just a quick reminder on that, you can listen at multiple speed as well to get through them a bit quicker. I'm a 1.6. I was up to 2.5, but someone told me that you don't absorb as much at that speed. So I've gone back to 1.6. But what we're going to do is take a short break to thank our sponsors, and then we'll come back to the rapid fire section. Imagine stepping into a sales call and your potential client already knows and understands your expertise and is eager to engage with you. It sounds like a dream scenario, but with the right tool, it's entirely achievable. Introducing Tella.tv, Tella, your ultimate solution for personalized pre-sales videos. Tella TV empowers you to craft impactful video messages that resonate with your potential clients before you connect with them. One of the standout features of Tella is its seamless editing capabilities and automatic captioning, saving you time and ensuring your message is clear and accessible to all viewers. Ready to revolutionize your pre-sales process? Tella.tv today by visiting our resource page at paulhigginsmentoring.com/resources and clicking on Tella. Elevate your sales game with Tella because your success starts before the call even begins. Excellent. So, Laurence, sip a beer. Being a POM, I don't know how you can drink lukewarm beer, but anyway, we like it a bit colder here. But just think of that as your answer these rapid fire questions. So the first one is, what are some of the daily habits that help you to successfully grow Brid?
The daily habit that I have, which is got taught to me when I was a recruitment agent in the job I ever had, is looking at my to-do list, which has always got 100 items, and
Yeah.
what is the thing that's going to bring in revenue today? Always focusing on the revenue generating activities, be that getting an MSA across to a client, or being that filling out something to get revenue into the business. So that's one of the key things that I always do is looking at my to-do list and looking at which things are going to actually bring in revenue and money to the business.
Great. And where do you go to learn more about running Brid?
Yeah, I think about running Brid, there's a few different tools. So Tech Collective will be one of them, which is a great resource that we use. The other one would be Slack Community. Slack Community is huge. If you haven't joined up already, there's, I think, over 13,000 members globally in that Slack workspace. And I lead the Singapore chapter, and 3 or 4 of my team lead chapters all across the world as well. Great resources that around what Slack can do. And then I'm also a member of Pavilion as well. Pavilion community, has some great resources around, founders and how to kind of run a business.
Yeah, fantastic. And if I could grant you one wish for Brid, what would that be?
I think the wish would be just the understanding generally of Slack not being a messaging tool. That's the
Yes.
biggest fight that we have to fight every day. But it's definitely getting there. But yeah, that understanding is the biggest hurdle we face every day. Is well, I have Teams or I have WhatsApp. How is this different? As soon as we get to show them how it is different, the floodgates open really.
Yeah, great. And the last question is, looking back, I know you've been in business for a short period of time, but what do you wish you had have done sooner in reflection?
Yeah, I think I would have, thought global. I think we live in a world now where people are more than happy to take, video calls or meet virtually, and I think we thought too small too early and just spent kind of the first 3 to 6 months in our backyard here in Asia, which was a great testing ground. In fact, the real opportunity is globally for this type of business. So even though we didn't wait too long to do that, I would have probably done that earlier, more from like month 1 or 2.
Fantastic. Well, you've been listening to Laurence. I'll talk more in the outros, how you can get in contact with him and all the links. But thanks a lot for helping us set up the Tech Collective. It certainly was the right tool at the right time, Slack. It's been fantastic. And also look forward to you helping other people in our community introduce Slack more into other businesses. So thanks, Laurence, for coming on today.
Yeah, great, Paul. Thanks.
That was a great interview with Laurence. Went a little longer than normal just because we've got so much to cover. But I love the fact that Slack could be the window to that Salesforce world. I think that's a great way to look at it. The second is the automation and integrations are there, and we're just tapping the service ourselves. But I think your clients will benefit for that. And the last one is lists. If your clients aren't using all of the features of a full-blown project management software, it's a great addition. Reach out to Laurence on LinkedIn, say that you heard him on the show, and ask him questions. His profile will be in the link, or will be in the link in the show notes. Also, if your peers could benefit, whether it's a Salesforce partner or others, please share it with them. There's nothing worse than keeping a secret from your friends. Watch the episode, as I said, on Paul Higgins' Mentoring, the YouTube channel, and I'll see you next time on the Paul Higgins Show. Time for action. Let me know what you implemented from the show. I promise to respond. Plus, get the Tech Consultants Roadmap at paulhigginsmentoring.com/roadmap.